When you read the Bible, are you reading what the author wrote or what 2,000 years of tradition taught you to see? That gap between ancient intent and modern assumption shapes everything. Today, we're learning a method scholars use to close that gap: historical criticism. Consider Psalm 110, verse 1. The Lord said to my Lord, "Sit at my right hand." Many Christians read this as God the Father speaking to Jesus the Son, a conversation within the Trinity. But the psalmist wrote this roughly 1,000 years before Jesus was born. The original audience heard something entirely different: God addressing their king. Same words, two completely different meanings. Which reading is correct? That depends on what question you're asking. Historical criticism asks one specific question: what did the author intend to communicate to their original audience? This differs fundamentally from two other valid questions. What actually happened seeks historical reconstruction. What does this mean for my life seeks personal application. Historical criticism does neither. It reconstructs meaning, not events. It recovers ancient understanding, not modern relevance. Think of it as reading someone else's mail. Mail written in a different language, culture, and century. Your job is to understand what the sender meant, not what the letter means to you. Here's the first key principle. Read each text independently. Mark is not Matthew. When Mark leaves something ambiguous, resist the urge to fill in details from Luke or John. Each gospel author made deliberate choices: what to include, what to exclude, what to emphasize. Those choices reveal their theology. When we blend four gospels into one harmonized story, we lose four distinct perspectives. We end up with a fifth gospel that none of the authors actually wrote. Now we reach the most common mistake readers make: anachronism. Right? Anachronism means reading later ideas back into earlier texts. Return to Psalm 110. The Trinitarian reading, Father speaking to Son, requires theological concepts that didn't exist when the psalm was composed. The doctrine of the Trinity was formalized at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. The psalm was written over 1,000 years earlier. The original author couldn't have intended a meaning that required concepts not yet invented. Reading the Trinity into this psalm is like reading electricity into a medieval text about lightning. This distinction matters. The historical critical approach doesn't claim the theological reading is wrong. It claims that reading wasn't available to the original author or audience. The psalmist couldn't intend a Trinitarian meaning any more than Shakespeare could intend a Freudian reading of Hamlet. Freud hadn't been born yet. We're asking what the text meant then, not what it can mean now. A crucial clarification: historical criticism isn't skepticism dressed in academic robes. It's not about debunking faith or proving the Bible wrong. It's a disciplined method for understanding ancient texts on their own terms. Many scholars use historical criticism professionally while holding deep theological beliefs personally. The method doesn't require abandoning faith. It requires temporarily setting aside what you believe the text should mean to discover what the author actually meant. These are different tasks. Let's address another confusion. Historical criticism doesn't tell us what really happened. Mark's gospel describes Jesus walking on water. Historical criticism asks, what did Mark want his audience to understand from this story? What theological point was he making? It doesn't ask, did Jesus literally walk on water? And that's a different question, requiring different methods. Historical criticism reconstructs intended meaning. It makes no claims about historical events. Confusing these two questions derails most amateur attempts at biblical scholarship. One more principle. Differences between Gospels aren't problems to solve. When Mark and Matthew tell the same story differently, the instinct is to harmonize, to explain away the differences. Historical criticism resists this. Those differences are data. They reveal what each author emphasized, what each community needed to hear. Mark's Jesus says different things than Matthew's Jesus in parallel passages. That's not a contradiction requiring explanation. That's two authors making distinct theological choices. The differences are the point. Here's a practical tool you can use immediately. Before interpreting any biblical passage, pause and ask 3 questions. First, what would the original audience have understood by this? Second, am I importing ideas from other biblical texts to make sense of this? Third, am I assuming concepts that didn't exist when this was written? These 3 questions will transform how you read ancient texts. Next time you read Mark's Gospel, try reading it as if Matthew, Luke, and John don't exist. You might be surprised what you notice.